Once upon a time, in a sunny meadow, there lived a friendly rabbit named Rosie and a silly duck named Ducky. They were the best of friends and loved to play funny games together. They would spend hours every day chasing each other, hiding and seeking, and making each other laugh. One day, as Rosie and Ducky were hopping and waddling through the meadow, they saw a group of birds playing a game they had never seen before. The birds were taking turns flapping their wings and trying to fly as far as they could. Rosie and Ducky thought this looked like great fun, so they asked if they could join in. The birds were happy to have some new players, so they explained the rules of the game. Each player would take turns flapping their wings and trying to fly as far as they could. The player who flew the farthest distance would win the game. Rosie went first. She flapped her long ears and hopped into the air, but she quickly landed back on the ground. Ducky went next. He flapped his wings and started to waddle down the meadow. He was having so much fun that he forgot he was supposed to be flying. He tripped over a rock and tumbled head over heels. The birds laughed and cheered, but Rosie and Ducky were determined to do better. They practiced flapping their wings and hopping higher and higher. They tried again and again, but they couldn't seem to fly very far. Just as they were about to give up, they heard a loud noise coming from the other side of the meadow. It was a group of frogs playing a game called Jumping Jacks. The frogs were hopping and jumping over each other in a silly dance. Rosie and Ducky thought this looked like even more fun than the birds' game, so they ran over to join in. The frogs welcomed them and explained the rules of the game. Each player would take turns hopping over the other players in a silly dance. Rosie went first. She hopped over the first frog, but then she accidentally hopped into the second frog. The frogs all tumbled into a big pile, and everyone started giggling. Ducky went next. He hopped over the first frog, but then he hopped too high and landed on top of the second frog. The frogs all tumbled into a big pile again, and everyone started laughing. Rosie and Ducky had so much fun playing with the birds and frogs that they decided to invent their own game. They called it Funny Bunny and Silly Duck. In this game, Rosie would pretend to be a bunny, and Ducky would pretend to be a duck. They would take turns making each other laugh with their silly antics and funny jokes. Rosie started by wiggling her nose and hopping around like a bunny. Ducky quacked and waddled around like a duck. Then, Rosie told a joke. "Why did the duck cross the meadow?" she asked. "I don't know," said Ducky. "Why?" "To get to the other side," Rosie replied, and they both burst out laughing. Ducky decided to tell a joke too. "Why did the rabbit cross the road?" he asked. "I don't know," said Rosie. "Why?" "To prove he wasn't a chicken," Ducky replied, and they both giggled. They played Funny Bunny and Silly Duck for hours, taking turns making each other laugh and doing silly dances. They had so much fun that they didn't even notice when the sun started to set and it was time to go home. As they said goodbye to their new friends, the birds and the frogs, Rosie and Ducky promised to come back and play with them again soon. They hopped and waddled back to their burrow, feeling happy and tired after such a fun day. The next day, Rosie and Ducky woke up early and couldn't wait to play Funny Bunny and Silly Duck again. They hopped and waddled over to the meadow and found their friends waiting for them. They played the game with even more enthusiasm than the day before, coming up with even sillier dances and funnier jokes. The birds and frogs joined in too, and they all laughed and played together. After a while, they decided to try some new games too. They played Tag, Duck, Duck, Goose, and Simon Says. They even played a game where they had to balance eggs on their noses without letting them fall off. It was the most fun Rosie and Ducky had ever had, and they were grateful for their new friends. They knew they would always have someone to play with and make them laugh. As the sun began to set, they said goodbye to their friends and hopped and waddled back to their burrow. They were tired but happy, and they knew they would dream about all the fun they had that day. From that day on, Rosie and Ducky made a habit of visiting their friends in the meadow every day. They played funny games, told silly jokes, and made memories that would last a lifetime. And even though they never did quite master the birds flying game, they knew that they didn't need to fly to have fun. All they needed was each other and their imaginations. The end.